Good afternoon. My name is Vasilia Kazuli, and I would like to welcome you to the afternoon session of the first online educational conference from the 20th to the 21st century in just 15 days. Η επόμενη συνεδρία θα είναι στην αγγλική γλώσσα. The next presentations will be in the English language, where we will discuss the international implications of the COVID-19 virus for education. And today we will be informed about implications for schools in Cyprus, Scotland, Germany, Portugal, the United Kingdom, Austria, for other countries in Europe, and internationally as well. So I would like to thank you. I would like to thank the organizers, first of all, for inviting me. I would like to thank the presenters, and I would like to thank all of you for attending. So we will begin today with Mr. Charalambos Vrasidas, who is going to talk about the myths and realities of online education in Cyprus. Mr. Vrasidas? Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to share some of our experiences with online education. I will share my screen now and begin. All right. So I'm here today sharing with you some experiences over the last 20 years involved in distance education. I wear two hats. One, I'm the director of Quartet, and the other, I'm a professor of learning innovations and associate dean for e-learning at the University of Nicosia. Just a word about our organization. We are involved in many initiatives having to do with the use of technology in education, and in particular, designing online learning environments. I was personally involved and designed my first online course in '96 while I was a PhD student in Arizona. And then in the year 2000, I designed my first virtual high school, and I was a part of the team that we designed the first online masters. Since then, we've been researching this topic a lot, and it's our core area of interest. I would like to clarify a couple of issues before we proceed, because for some, distance education is a new thing, and because we were forced globally to use it, but it's been around for many years. And there are two issues. The first is the word distance. By using the term distance education, distance learning, the emphasis usually is mistakenly placed on the distance and not on the education. And the other part has to do with the delivery metaphor. For many years before the invention of the internet, the majority of distance education programs use the delivery metaphor, meaning delivering knowledge and delivering content to learners. The distance was separated in two, whether space, we're not in the same space, or time, meaning synchronous versus asynchronous. The fundamental principle, though, for distance education and online learning is interaction. If we accept that interaction is the fundamental principle for education, then when we design for interaction, the delivery mode becomes irrelevant in most cases. And also another clarification that is very important has to do with what we were asked globally to do the last few months is not the norm. We were asked to respond to a crisis. It's very different when you have to respond to a crisis and designing online learning and engaging with distance education. And it's different doing it when you are ready you are planning it for years and you have all the processes, infrastructure in place. So what happened the last 4 months was not under normal conditions. If we look briefly at the history of distance education, well, let me go back 1 second. The traditional form of schooling, the way we know it, has about 100 years history. Okay, 100, 150. People have been learning for thousands of years, and we have evolved over the centuries by learning via other means. So the formal schooling is a fairly new thing in the history of humanity. If you look at distance education, probably the first known in the literature is, the University of Chicago, when they started offering the first courses via correspondence around 1892. And after that, there was an international association called the International Correspondence Education Association that was formed, which, because of the development of the internet and then other means like television, satellite broadcast, in 1982, it changed its name to International Council of Distance Education. Since then, there was a huge growth, and the last few years, we all know that, at least in higher education and corporate, is used widely. Now, in order to see what is the reality, what's happening during distance education, we need to understand some basic fundamental constructs. These ideas are not new. They are also applicable, many of them, in traditional schooling and traditional forms of education. The central part is interaction, which means when we design education, as a learning designer, I need to design for opportunities for my learners to interact with content, peers, students, tools, experts, and so on. And structure and the design is critical. And so is feedback, so is support, so is the teacher philosophy, so is the technology infrastructure, and so on. One of my earlier works focused on ethnographic research comparing face-to-face and online interaction, a lot of the things we take for granted. The immediacy of interaction in a classroom and the speed and the coherence is unparalleled. Although technologies are evolving, although we have VR, AR, video conferencing, we improved speeds of the internet, we're still far from approximating the experience of sitting in the same room with 10 of our students and engaging in a discussion. This has important implications on how I will design my online environment and the visual aspect, being able to see and talk. In a classroom, I walk in, I see 2 confused faces, I can pause, ask clarifying questions, and so on. Online, even if you have the cameras on, it's difficult to really get those subtle back channeling, what is called, going on. And there was also a big debate in many countries whether during distance education in schools, we should have the cameras on and off. So we can discuss that later. Another important component now of the online and distance education is the social aspect, the construct known as social presence. And that's why one of the reasons traditionally distance education programs have high attrition rates is because of the lack of social presence, people feeling isolated, remote, and when there are no proper support structures, this becomes even more complicated. Now, the reality of it is that during this pandemic, we had a lot of the equality issues being highlighted, meaning although the idea of moving online sounded reasonable and it was a good alternative, several issues arose. For example, access And access to technology is not the only part. Internet access, skills to access and use online learning environments. The family, particularly in K-12, meaning primary and secondary schools, teachers had to talk daily with parents, grandparents, whoever was taking care of children at home. And this coordination was also a challenge. A challenge also regarding equality had to do with the infrastructure. Not all schools have this fast internet and up-to-date technology that they can engage simultaneously in a live connection with hundreds of students. And for teachers who work from home, also there was an issue there because not all teachers have the proper skills, infrastructure, and so on. So we know that for online education to work, and it can work, and the research shows that, we need a proper plan, we need to think ahead, we need systemic approaches, we need professional development, and not only for teachers. We should not assume that our learners know how to learn online. One of the courses we're developing right now is on how to teach learners to be good online learners, successful online learners. The age group matters. We cannot have children, 10, 11-year-olds, for 6 hours in a row on a live conference. We need to take small chunks, think ahead, plan work that can be individually, pair people, and so on. Support is critical. We have to have ongoing support for that. Call centers, help desk, support for the technology, support for the pedagogical aspect. And of course, we need ongoing evaluations. We learned that globally, and not just Cyprus, globally, we were not ready for this pandemic. That's the reality. And we also, if there is something that is kind of depressing, if you think about it, that is a quote unquote positive that came out of it, is the accelerated change. It forced us all to think that distance education can be a good method that can address problems and is as effective as face-to-face. The impact of COVID, at some recent research I was looking at, we don't even know yet regarding education, but it's very likely to accentuate the gap, and the problems will be even more difficult for those students who were at risk. And of course, a lot of uncertainty. A lot of the things that were caused had to do with the fact it was not clear, and still is not clear. Will schools open in September? In many countries, it's not clear. Will universities open? Exams, issues of mental health that I will touch now because I think it's critical. Parental involvement, and of course, positive relations. We really believe in that. Now, a couple of myths that I think we need to think very critical about. The first is that for many years, distance education was considered as a poor alternative to face-to-face. Well, the research shows exactly the opposite, okay? The assumption that traditional schooling was the best model for all it's a false assumption. The research shows that schools are not as effective as they should. So, and all the research shows that when designed properly, online education can be at least as effective. The other myth is that online education is easy. I connect to a video camera, upload a PowerPoint, and I'm set. Well, it's not. And now we've seen that teaching online requires much more effort. And this has strong implications about teacher professional development, teacher workload, support, and so on. The other myth I've heard many times is that, no, distance education is here, but it will not replace face-to-face education, traditional schooling. Well, it has already done, and in many sectors it has achieved, and if designed properly, it can be of very good quality. So the last myth is that online education is good for all subjects or age groups or teachers or learners. It's not, but the same goes for traditional schooling. Traditional schooling is not the best model for everybody, for all subjects, and we know that. So we need to think about how we approach these issues. Now, a quick note about if we look at what is important and what we have to rethink about education, if you ask me, from the three big issues, knowledge, skills, and character, what I would like my 10-year-old son to develop, the priority for me would be character, resilience, being able to engage ethics, leadership. We're running a program now that focuses exactly on that, on positive behavior support, and we're beginning seminars for positive relations in the school, and to also as a way to combat the possible mental health issues that will arise from this pandemic. And a very nice piece I was reading a couple of weeks ago helped me rethink a bit about the issues that we need to think now about. The traditional 3R, reading, writing, arithmetic, now we have the new 3R, metaphorically speaking, which is regulate. We need to make sure that we're back on track. Relate, meaning connect again with our students, our colleagues, and make sure everybody is okay and we're ready to roll. And then reach and engage in actual teaching and learning. So we need to think about all these issues. And concluding, we're in the process now, at least in Cyprus, in collaboration with the Cyprus Pedagogical Institute under the Ministry of Education, we're conducting a large-scale research now to examine how exactly was distance learning implemented in Cyprus public schools, what were the practices and tools used, what challenges were faced, and what can we learn from designing the next steps. So with that, I think I'm exactly on time. So concluding, I think we need to look at it systemically. Teacher professional development is important. Rethinking our curricula now is the time. And of course, thinking more about solutions and not just talking about problems might be a good mindset to take us forward. With that, concluding, I will stop here, and I'm available, I understand, for questions. Thank you for listening. We cannot hear you.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes.
I would like to thank Mr. Charalambos Vrasidas for his intellectually stimulating presentation. You brought a lot of important issues to the table that we can discuss maybe later on. I would like to just say the last thing that you said about thinking about solutions and not problems is, I think that this is the whole purpose of this entire conference. And we can move on to the questions now. Let's see if we have questions from the people who are listening to our presentations.
Yes, please allow me, a question has been raised to Dr. Vrasidas regarding the importance of the connection between synchronous and asynchronous modes and the interaction. Now, how important is this connection?
Yes. In the traditional classroom, the teaching and learning takes place synchronously. The asynchronous part is when students go home and they have a lot of homework to do. Even though we know that a lot of research shows that a lot of homework doesn't really help, okay? In the online, because the synchronous and asynchronous can play a very good balance, because being connected live like we do here, it can be very tiring to be live on camera and talking and being alert all the time. And that's why a lot of the research shows if we go for smaller parts of synchronous and then allow students to work asynchronous, provided they have the proper support, then might be a good alternative. Also, pairing students so that they do group work, even during the synchronous and the asynchronous. And there are a lot of tools that can do that. But for that to work, you need good learning design, and not all of our teachers can really teach online because it requires an adaptive thinking and a new mode of thinking about how to teach and learn. But at the same time, it requires that our students are self-disciplined and self-motivated enough, and they have the skills needed to work independently asynchronous, and then so we will be able to take the advantage both of the synchronous and the asynchronous.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vrasidas. Vasily, do we have any other questions?
No, there is not another question. It's there are mostly comments about the need for blended mode of education, and I believe that Dr. Vrasidas' talk was focused on this.
I think we can come back to some of these issues in the end when we have all of the panel discussion. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Vrasidas.
Thank you.
There was a lot of things to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.